Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Thursday, May the 22nd, 2025, and today's topic I'm going to call drawing thumbnails for comics and illustrations. But before we begin, welcome back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use a timer to stay focused and to build a habit. I'll start a 10-minute timer, and right now I'm in the process of going through my sketchbook and filling in the blank spaces. So I started this back in October, and it was about, well, I called it creating thumbnails for comics and like close-up shots and things like that. I haven't watched the video, but this will be in the comics or drawing comics playlist, so it'll have more details. But today I thought I would talk about, so I did this sketch. I just did this a few minutes ago. I wanted to talk about how if you have these little thumbnails, which are basically doodles, how you can go from that to like this version, which is basically a sketch. It's kind of like a thumbnail, but bigger. So yeah, like that's like, to me, like that's thumbnail size. And then this is a little bit bigger. This is like a sketch. Well, I wouldn't even call it like a layout. So I'll write down some of these terms. Yeah, to get this look, I'm using a fine liner and a Sharpie, and you can use whatever. And these are just ideas. There's not like one way to do this. Once you kind of experiment and kind of get like a feel for it, depending on like the purpose and everything, then you'll kind of have like your own preferred method. So here are a few terms before we get into it. So one thing is, yeah, like thumbnails. Another is doodles. And then there's the like creative, and then the like technical. So these kind of go together. So thumbnails are kind of like a technical version of like doodles. So for example, like this, they're basically doodles or approached in a doodling kind of way, but maybe they have some like more of a purpose than just doodling. So in this case, maybe like a comic, like a sequence. So that's what makes it into a comic. And if you just had this, like just by itself, it wouldn't really be a comic. If it's just, then it would be like an illustration, and that's why I'm calling it that. But if there is a sequence, like if there's something that came before it or something that's going to happen afterwards, then it would be a comic. If this was just like on one piece of paper, then I wouldn't call that really a comic. It would be an illustration. And even if you put like word balloons or something, to me, I mean, it would be like a single panel comic. It would be kind of pushing it a little bit. It would be kind of incomplete. But yeah, just to get started, I'll take this one right here, this thumbnail. So this may turn into kind of a deep dive because there's a lot that goes into this. And it's not just for comics, it's also, yeah, like for illustration. But in this case, it'll look kind of like a comic because I'm going to go with like the sequence. So for example, to do this kind of style, if I had like a thumbnail, so to me, like this is an actual thumbnail, and then this is developing it, it's helpful because then you don't get stuck in the like the details of it. Now, of course, the next step for me to kind of what I would do and to what I'll demonstrate is for this video, I'll take something like this and just make it like that much more detailed. But I'll take this for now. And when I have a thumbnail, then I can just do like simple shapes. And it's just easier to copy like the shape because it's a way of working out like the design of it. So like this. So part of what helps, because I used to collect comics and read them a lot more. I'm not really as big of a fan of them now. Like I like the old school comics. So that's how I got a lot of these ideas. And then you have like books like Understanding Comics, I think it's called. And then also if you look in the playlist that I have called Drawing Movies or something, I haven't done them in a while because they take a lot of work, surprisingly. But yeah, there's like a playlist that I did, and I think I did Blade Runner, Troy, and Excalibur just because I wanted to watch them, like rewatch them. And then I just I watched them and paused at scenes that were interesting, and then I would just do these like thumbnails. And so that helps a lot for thumbnails because then you can kind of see like how they frame shots. Now, of course, comics give you a lot more, I like them because they sort of bridge the gap between like a movie and then like illustrations. So there, you can do a lot with comics. So anyway, the point is, this is like a doodle, but there's like a technical aspect of it. It could be a sequence like this. And even when you're drawing a comic, you might decide to do it this way, where like this was the shadow, but then all of a sudden like the shadow is like in the background. So that's one way to do it. And then when you're using like different pens, I wanted to use a fine line and like a Sharpie, because even this will tell you some things about how to detail it, how to render it. And again, that it all depends. There's like an infinite way of doing it. And this is also helpful if you are wanting to do like color studies and stuff, but that'll be for another video. So this is one way to approach it, and this actually isn't a bad, like it's not a bad look. The composition is there, like the shapes are there, the pose because of this. Now, if you want to add a little bit more detail for like the next step, which is maybe to draw out like the pose, because I like this because it gives you options. I'll just stick with the lighting because it depends on what you want to do with it. So I'll just go like this. So in a way, this is, you can develop some of the kind of like this, like it's like the gesture of it. And yeah, you could leave some of this, depend, like there might be a lot of text, so it depends. So just looking at the thumbnail, I can see what gives it like the nice like gesture. See, kind of like this. Like that's the shape of that. But thumbnails are good because it gives it life. You can play around with like shapes. So let's say I didn't really like that pose, and this just, again, it comes from practice. Like I was saying, like I was practicing with like watching movies, for example, just to kind of get the silhouette. So like this one, for example, may not be that great. So just to do like another version of that, like in thumbnail size, I might decide to just go like this. And this is like doodling. Instead of, like, you can see what is good or not good like pretty quickly by doing this. Like you can work out some stuff. So let's say I have some scribble like doodling, and this is how I would just kind of doodle anyway. So then you can like kind of like this, make it into something. Again, it's meant to be quick, and then to get like the bigger version of it, like a more detailed version, just copy the shape. So let's say I want it to fit like right here. I'm just going to copy the shapes. Like this is like the basic shape of it. Like the shape meaning the shape, like the outline of it. That's the shape. And it doesn't have to look that realistic. You can turn it into realistic, but that's like the shape of the pose. I guess beginners, if you want to call it that, like, and also at some point that like I was a beginner at this, you get lost in like the trying to draw the figure, and the figure doesn't like read, like there's not, it's boring basically. And that's usually what people do, is they get stuck on like the trying to draw the figure, but really this is what reads. Like you can see this in a second and it reads. The practice comes from this part, because if you were to try to draw a very detailed picture, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get attached to like the final picture. Whereas like here, this gives me a lot more information. I can figure stuff out here. So let's just do that like for kind of the last part of the video. I'll talk about how to take like a like this is like a doodle. And then this is like a thumbnail. I wrote down creative and technical because a lot of what I'm saying right now is technical information. But the creative part for me, for example, is the fact that I did this back in October. And so like that's the idea. That's like the imagination part. So that's like the creative part. Like I didn't really know what I was going to draw. So that's like the creative part. That's the part where you're creating something new. The technical stuff is like how to draw thumbnails and how to develop them, and then how to do like figure drawing, for example, and how to do like comics. So in this next part, I'm just going to develop like one. So let's just say this much. So notice that everything is like relative. So this could be a drawing in a comic, but depending on the size of like the comic that you're working on, like the resolution of it, this is probably going to not have enough detail, but like maybe some shots will be like that. Just an example. And then I'll draw, so I'm just going to draw a bigger version of this one. That's why it's good to have sketches and thumbnails so that you're not spending so much time on this part. And then when you get to this size, which is like thumbnail to like quick sketch to like basically this could be like a layout, because this could be a panel, and it's getting to the point where I would be like, I would call it like over here, I'll put down layout. This could be like a layout sketch. It would still be sketchy, but there's enough room to give it a more detail. And I'm going to call it a layout sketch because keep it sketchy enough so that you're not spending so much time, so that let's say you're drawing this in like a sketchbook or on like a sheet of printer paper or something, it would still be preliminary. Like that's not like the final. And so you want to keep it loose enough to, one, you're not spending so much time, and also you're not having to redraw like the detail, because that's not really that fun, because that's like a lot of the detail, like the creativity comes through in the detail stage. Part of it is also you can work out like the pose, and this is where maybe you could look up reference, but I probably wouldn't even, I mean, it depends on how much you know like how to draw like certain things. So I don't really need reference for like the figure drawing, so I'm just going to take this one, and you can change the composition. So I'll keep it kind of similar. Actually, I won't because I need the figure to fit here, and that's okay because you can always, again, redraw it. So with that in mind, let me just draw like the figure. Let's say that you just wanted to study the figure, just to have like a good figure drawing. So you need to know like the proportion. I'm just going to make it fit. I'm going to make it fit like right here. Like that's the main thing. And I'm just going to focus on the figure itself, because I need it to be big enough to where I can add detail. And it depends on how you want to develop the figure. So I'm just going to put it right here. And this is the basic like proportion of it, and the basic like gesture of it, you see there. And that's why I call it a layout sketch, because it's better to be like loose about it. Now it could be argued, well, why don't you, I actually have an app on my phone that you can pose figures. Like I have an iPhone, and I mean, there's like resources like that, and of course you can look up reference and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I tend to use that for studies so that I can draw this like out of my head. That's why I use that. Same with like reference. I tend to use it for either a study, or like once I draw something, then I'll look it up to like get ideas. But it's meant to go with like my drawing, because you can do this. It's not that difficult. I mean, it takes some practice. So I'm keeping it sketchy enough to where, number one, so I don't get stuck. And so going back to like what I was saying about, yeah, you could look up stuff like reference, or try to set up some kind of pose or something like that. The problem is then it takes more time, and it takes more work, honestly, than to just know how to draw something. and then it kills your like enthusiasm. Because this is the creative part of it. It kills the creativity. It becomes too technical. That's why I wanted to call it that, like the difference. So I'm kind of keeping with the composition. Because you can always trace over this again. It depends on what you're going to do with it. You could also scan it in or take a photo of it and like clean it up digitally, or you can draw it. See, now that I got this far, I can start to draw the figure. Like, so really like the thumbnail was to get like the gesture of it and like the shape of it right here. Like that's what that was good for, not anatomy. It was for the composition. And maybe even like the lighting and stuff. This is for to get the figure, like you can do a layout. So that'll get you the figure. And of course you need like a character. This is sort of a character that I like to use, like kind of the main character that I use. Like that helps also. I mean, if not, you could just draw like a generic, I guess, figure. Yeah, but this is where like you can do the mannequin, like the stick figure. You can use whatever method works. I'm just using a mannequin. And again, it depends on how much you want the figure to look a certain way. Like it could look more abstract, and it just depends. Kind of like that. And then you just develop depends on the look of the character. Now at this point, you could just put in some of you can look at this and sort of get an idea of what that could look like. If you really just need the silhouette, let's say you're gonna put a sheet of paper, I mean, it depends on how you want to go about it. I'll just draw an outline real quick. Kind of like this. So I made this sketchy enough to where if I just needed sort of like the basic outline, I could just go like this and I could redraw it, because it's so like quickly, like it's so simple that I could like redraw this. Kind of like this. That's like the basic pose of it. And you can always do a more realistic or a more detailed. That's really not the issue. It's figuring this out. At least once you get used to drawing, then this becomes like the main thing. So yeah, like once I have this, I can always draw more detailed. So just as an example, I'm going to use like a loose pencil style. So this is just an example of how to take like a sketch that you have like in a sketchbook, and then get like the most important part of it. You can use a pencil or something else. Again, this is for comics or illustration. So that's kind of what I mean. So again, like this could be kind of the style. It's like at this point you might want to look up reference, or you might want to figure out like a different way of drawing it. But you can see that, yeah, you can see that like that's why I did it this way. So from a thumbnail to like a sketch to like a layout sketch, because that layout sketch can be used for like different styles. This is just an example, and I'm doing it like pretty quickly. Maybe you have a character design or something. Then the other example would be, so to me, for example, like this could work as something detailed. It depends on like the size of the illustration. So if this were like a comic, to me, like this is a pretty good, like decent panel size. You can get a lot of detail into this. Again, I'm just being like very loose about it just to show you real quick. The main thing was how to develop this. A lot of times I like this as it is, but I would redraw that. I wouldn't use this as like the final, but that's why I was being quick about it, because I don't want to waste a lot of time on this part if I know I'm going to redraw it. And then let's say I'm going to use like a sheet of paper as like the comic, as like the final drawing, then yeah, I would spend more time on this part, look up like the reference or like the character sheet or something. The other thing that you could do, just to kind of wrap up this video, is if you have this much, I probably wouldn't go into too much detail here. I'm just gonna look off of this. The other thing would be to, again, depends on your purpose. You could draw like a bigger version of it right here, and then use that as like an idea, kind of like this. Because it's a way of just getting like the shape. The gesture is really like kind of, I guess, the point. So yeah, you could be looking at something and do this. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I'm saying. Like, but if like I'm working on something and I'm needing to have to look up reference constantly in order to jot down like my ideas, like you could just do thumbnails. That's my point. It's not that, it's the same thing. Eventually it can become the same thing. So this is like, this was the like kind of a 1-to-1 ratio because I traced over it, but this is like a bigger version. The key is to keep it simple enough to where you can get to whatever size you're working, like you're wanting the final drawing to look. So let's say that this is so at this size, I can fit a lot of detail into this. But yeah, you could draw it even bigger. You can make it fit like the whole page if you wanted. But by doing it in this simpler way, I can get like the essential shapes. And I keep each stage simple enough to where I don't get attached to like the thumbnail or like the sketch until I have like the actual piece. Then I think, okay, now I'm gonna refine it in a more careful way. So hopefully that made sense, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll kind of keep going with this. There's also things like using this for like the color and stuff, like a color study. There's a lot more, obviously, to drawing comics and illustrations, but that'll be it for today. I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine, and if you enjoy these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it, and until next time, keep on sketching.